The hallway at Lincoln Elementary always carried the same morning symphony. Lockers slamming, bright chatter echoing, children weaving through the tide of backpacks and sneakers. But that morning, like so many before it, Miss Carter's attention drifted toward the boy who moved through all that noise without disturbing a single inch of air around him. Toby walked with his shoulders curved inward, hoodie sleeves pulled halfway over his hands as if they were shields. His backpack straps were tearing at the seams, thin threads curling outward like overworked nerves. His shoes were worn so unevenly that one side dipped when he stepped. And the hoodie, that same faded navy hoodie, it hung on him like a piece of clothing that had been washed too many times, too roughly, too desperately. Miss Carter noticed him instantly, not because he demanded attention, but because he tried so hard not to receive any. For the fourth day in a row, he wore the same outfit. She whispered under her breath. Day 4, same clothes, not as an accusation, but as a sorrowful acknowledgement of something she could feel pressing beneath the surface. He slipped into his seat at the third row, second desk, without speaking a single word. He didn't look around at the chatter or the friendships unfolding around him. He simply folded into himself, like someone trying to shrink out of the world's line of sight. The morning lesson began, and she moved through the room with practiced ease, but her thoughts circled him like quiet gravity. When she asked the class a question, hands shot up except his. His pencil shook faintly in his fingers, though he tried to steady it by pressing it harder against the desk. When she gently invited him to read aloud, he looked at the page, then at his hands, then at the floor. "I'd rather not, miss," he murmured, barely audible over the rustle of pages. His voice wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't shy. It was afraid. Lunch period arrived, and as the children scattered to their groups, she lingered near the cafeteria doors. Toby sat alone at the edge of a long bench, shoulders curved like he was taking up too much space just by breathing. He unfolded his lunch slowly, too slowly for someone hungry, and she watched as he wrapped half his sandwich in a napkin and slipped it into his hoodie pocket when he thought no one saw. Saving food. Always a sign. His hands trembled slightly, barely, but she saw it. When the afternoon sun shone across the classroom, she noticed something else. When he reached for a colored pencil, the cuff of his sleeve slid just a little too far. A small bruise shadowed the inside of his wrist. He yanked his sleeve down immediately, eyes flicking around the room to make sure no one else noticed, but she did. Her concern settled deeper into her, like cold sinking through a window pane. By the time the dismissal bell rang, she watched him walk down the sidewalk from her classroom window, small steps, careful steps, steps of someone who didn't want to draw attention, or steps of someone not eager to go home. The next day, the pattern held. Same hoodie, same jeans, same worn shoes. But now the hoodie looked damp. Not from rain, it hadn't rained. More like fabric that had been washed by hand and dried without enough time or space. During art class, he kept his sleeves down no matter how warm the room became. And again, she caught a glimpse of the faint discoloration on his wrist. "Toby," she said gently as she approached, "can I see your hand for a moment?" His reaction was immediate. His entire body stiffened. "It's nothing," he whispered, pulling his sleeve down so hard the fabric bunched at his palm. "I'm fine, miss. I'm fine." He wasn't fine. Not even close. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the tremble in his voice, the bruise on his wrist, the way he saved food, the worn clothes that never changed. Something was wrong. Not a little wrong. Deeply wrong. And she had to find out what. The following afternoon, after most students had been picked up, she stayed behind to finish grading. Rain hammered the windows in thick, heavy sheets. The world outside blurred into water and gray. She glanced out the window and froze. There, standing alone on the far end of the playground, was Toby. No umbrella, no jacket, just the thin hoodie, now soaked to his skin. He stood still, unnaturally still, as if waiting for something inevitable. "Toby!" she shouted the moment she stepped outside. her clothes already clinging to her as the rain soaked through. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" He didn't move until she was standing right in front of him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, voice breaking with concern. "I'm not supposed to go home yet." Her breath caught. Not supposed to? What did that mean? "Why not?" she asked gently, guiding him under the awning. He hugged his backpack close, water dripping from the frayed fabric. "It's just better when I wait." The words were laced with a pain so deep, it didn't belong to a 10-year-old. It barely belonged to an adult. She didn't push further. She couldn't, not without breaking whatever fragile trust he still held. But something inside her shifted. A decision. A promise. The next day, with a lead from the district and a social worker beside her, she knocked on the door of an apartment listed in his file. The hallway smelled of dampness and stale smoke. The paint was peeling. The carpet was worn thin. Apartment 3B. The numbers dangled crookedly, one held on by a single nail. "Toby?" the social worker called softly. "It's Miss Lane and Miss Carter. Could we talk to you for a moment?" A faint voice answered, so small it nearly vanished beneath the hum of the flickering hallway light. "It's open." The door creaked as it swung inward. The smell hit them first, not rot, not filth, but something heavier, something human and heartbreaking. The apartment was dim. Blankets hung over the windows. Clothes lay scattered across the floor. A single lamp flickered in a corner, and on a mattress against the wall, 2 adults lay unmoving, their breaths shallow, their faces slack, eyes half open but seeing nothing. Miss Carter's heart stopped. "Oh, Toby." He stood near a small shelf where a few cans and cereal boxes were lined up neatly, as if he'd tried to create order in chaos. "They're home," he whispered, eyes fixed on the bed, "but they don't wake up much, only sometimes." Miss Carter pressed a hand to her chest, fighting tears. "How long have they been like this?" she asked softly. He shrugged, an adult gesture welded onto a child's frame. "A while. I can make my own food. I wash my clothes so they don't smell like down there." He pointed to the basement door. "So I don't get teased. And sometimes I wait outside until they stop yelling." His voice broke. "Just a little. Just enough. Please don't take me away," he whispered. "If I leave, who will make sure they don't choke, or start a fire, or hurt themselves?" The room blurred through Miss Carter's tears. Not because she couldn't bear what she saw, but because she couldn't bear how long she hadn't seen it. Miss Carter didn't cry in front of him. She didn't let the horror reshape her face, or let the fear tighten her voice. She knew instinctively that if she broke, he would break. So she stood still, breathing through the ache, offering the only steady thing in the room: her presence. The paramedics arrived quietly, their voices low as they assessed the 2 unconscious adults. Toby watched from the corner, arms wrapped around his thin body, as if trying to hold himself together. When one of the paramedics gently asked him when his parents had last been fully awake, he answered without hesitation, as though he had kept mental notes for months. "I think a few days ago," he murmured. "Maybe 4, maybe 5. They sleep a lot. They get tired. They take things to help them sleep. But then they don't wake up for a long time." He didn't speak like a child describing something scary. He spoke like someone describing weather. Predictable, unavoidable, normal. That hurt the most. When they gently lifted his parents onto stretchers, Toby stepped forward suddenly, panic blooming across his face. Wait, please don't take them. They get scared when they wake up somewhere else. They won't understand." A paramedic knelt beside him, voice calm. "We're not taking them away forever. We're taking them somewhere safe, where they can get help. They need medical care. They need rest. They need support." Toby shook his head violently. No. If they wake up alone, they'll be upset. They'll think I left them. I never leave. I'm always here. I take care of them. I'm good. I don't let anything happen." His voice cracked under the pressure of words he had held in for far too long. His small chest heaved, breaths sharp and unsteady. Miss Carter stepped forward and knelt in front of him. "Toby." Her voice was soft enough to wrap around him like a blanket. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." He squeezed his eyes shut, as if bracing for pain. "I was supposed to keep them safe," he whispered. I tried." Something inside her shattered. Not loudly, but quietly, like thin glass breaking under the weight of truth. "You're a child," she said gently. "You weren't meant to carry this alone." He didn't answer. He just stood there, shaking. As the paramedics wheeled his parents out of the apartment, out of the world he understood, into one he didn't know how to face. Miss Lane, the social worker, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll make sure you have somewhere safe to stay tonight." Toby nodded stiffly, but his eyes stayed glued to the door long after it closed, long after the sirens faded, long after the apartment sank back into its cold, heavy silence. He whispered to the empty space his parents had left behind. "I'll be good, I promise." Miss Carter almost broke then. Almost. But she held herself together because he needed her not to fall apart. The next hours blurred into a haze of phone calls, paperwork, emergency placements, and whispered instructions. Through it all, Toby moved like someone underwater, slow, quiet, disoriented. He answered questions but never volunteered anything. His face remained blank, but his eyes were oceans too deep for a boy his age. When Miss Carter finally left the hospital and sat in her car alone, the weight of the day crashed over her all at once. Tears spilled onto her hands as she gripped the steering wheel, her breath trembling. How long has he been carrying this alone? She whispered it into the silence, but the silence offered nothing back, just the echo of a truth she would never forget. She cried for him, for the childhood he had lost, for the fear he had lived in, for the weight he had borne like a tiny soldier in a war no child should ever fight. When she finally drove home, her hands still shook on the steering wheel. But by morning, she knew what she had to do. She showed up early, earlier than usual, standing in the front office when the foster coordinator brought Toby in. He walked beside a woman holding a folder, his mismatched clothes cleaned but still worn. His hair was brushed, though unevenly, as if he hadn't known how to let someone else help him. When he spotted her, he froze. His shoulders lifted not in excitement, but in fear, like he wasn't sure if she would still want to see him after everything she had discovered. "Hi, Toby," she said softly. "I missed you yesterday." He blinked, taken off guard. "You did?" "Of course I did. Class isn't the same without you." He looked down at his hands. "They said I might not come back, because sometimes when people find out stuff, kids get moved. Far away." She inhaled deeply, steadying her voice. "You're not going far. We made sure you could stay in the same school. You'll be with a foster family for now, but you'll still be close. You'll still be here with us." "With you?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, with me." Those two words seemed to unsteady him more than anything else that day. He swallowed hard, looked at the floor, and whispered, "Okay, I'll try to be good." Her heart cracked again. "You don't have to try. You already are." Class went on differently that day, not because she treated him differently, but because she saw clearly now what every small behavior had been hiding. When he hesitated to take seconds at lunch, she quietly asked the cafeteria staff to encourage him. When he flinched at loud noises, she softened transitions. When his hands trembled during writing, she placed a stress ball beside him without comment. And slowly, very slowly, he began to breathe again. The bruises healed, his eyes softened. He ate without hiding food. He spoke small sentences that hinted at the truth beneath. One afternoon, long after dismissal, he asked in a whisper, "What if my parents don't get better?" She placed her hand on the back of his chair, just lightly. "Then we'll make sure you're safe, no matter what." He sat very still, absorbing the promise. No one had ever promised him safety before. Weeks passed, then months. Spring stretched across the schoolyard, turning the playground into a field of newness, small blossoms pushing through wet soil, sunlight lingering longer each day. And slowly, something shifted in him. He began sitting closer to other children. He raised his hand once, not high, not long, but high enough to count. He smiled, not often, not widely, but once, and it was enough to anchor itself in her memory. But the moment she would carry with her for the rest of her life came on a Thursday afternoon just before dismissal. Toby approached her desk with something hidden behind his back. His steps were uncertain, like he was walking toward something fragile. "Miss Carter?" he whispered. "Yes, sweetheart?" He placed a small bracelet on her desk, a bracelet made of bright plastic beads, uneven in size and pattern, tied with a knot that stuck out messily. He didn't look at her. He looked at the bracelet, as if afraid to see her reaction. "We made them in after-school group," he murmured. "They said, we could give them to someone who makes us feel safe." His breath trembled. I wanted you to have it." The room around them fell away. No children, no noise, no ticking clock. Just a boy who had lived too much pain, giving her the first thing he had ever created without fear. She picked it up gently, holding it as though it were made of glass. "Toby, this is beautiful." He shifted, fingers tapping his leg nervously. "You don't have to wear it. I didn't know if I could say thank you." "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, slipping it onto her wrist immediately. "I'll wear it every day." He looked up then, slowly, searching her face for the truth. Really? A breath left him, one that seemed to carry months, maybe years of tension out of his chest. "I'm glad you saw me," he said softly. "Before, nobody did." She reached out and rested her hand over his for just a moment. "I'll always see you, Toby." He nodded once, pulled his backpack over his shoulder, and walked toward the door. But something was different now. His steps were firmer, his shoulders not quite as curved, as though the world had widened around him, just enough to let him breathe. Miss Carter stayed seated long after Toby left the room, her fingers brushing lightly over the uneven beads on her wrist. The bracelet felt small, almost weightless, but the meaning behind it settled into her like a warm, steady heartbeat. She wasn't just his teacher anymore. She had become something he hadn't known how to ask for. A safe place, a witness, a constant. And in the quiet that followed, she realized something else she had changed, too, without meaning to, without even noticing. She had begun carrying him in the same way he had carried the weight of his world, except hers was by choice, and his had never been. When she finally stood to gather her things, the sun was low, casting long golden rays across the desks. The light hit the bracelet just right, making the plastic beads glimmer. She lifted her wrist slightly, watching the colors catch the fading light. It looked like hope. The next morning, she wore it proudly, not as decoration, not as sentiment, but as a promise. When Toby walked into the classroom and saw it on her wrist, something flickered across his face, something soft and fleeting, like a shy sunrise behind clouds. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Healing never arrives loudly. It tiptoes in, softly, quietly, just like he did. The following weeks slipped by with a gentleness she hadn't expected. The foster family caring for him sent updates he was eating, sleeping, learning to be a child again. He had his own bed now, his own pillow, clothes that fit him, meals he didn't have to ration, a routine that didn't depend on the unpredictable rhythm of adults lost in addiction. Still, he carried shadows. Some days he was quiet. Some nights he had trouble sleeping. Some mornings he walked into class with an expression she recognized, the look of a child waiting to be disappointed. But he kept coming. He kept trying. And she kept showing up, day after day, greeting him with the same warmth, the same steadiness, the same gentle reassurance that she wasn't going anywhere. Then, one afternoon, months after everything had unfolded, Toby approached her desk again, this time holding something else, a worn notebook with bent corners and a rubber band holding it closed. He didn't speak at first. He just placed it gently in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, keeping her voice soft. He swallowed, eyes dropping. "It's my drawings," he murmured. "From before. I used to draw in the basement so nobody would hear me talk or move. It was quiet there." His voice faltered, sometimes too quiet. She opened the notebook carefully. Page after page of pencil sketches stared back at her shadows of rooms, corners of furniture, the shape of a mattress on the floor. But mixed among them were small, hopeful things to sunlight through a cracked window. A bird perched on a railing, a drawing of a boy holding a backpack too big for him. And then she reached one page that made her breath catch. It was a sketch of her, not perfect, not realistic, but unmistakably her, standing at the front of the classroom, sunlight streaming behind her, looking out at the students with the same warmth she hoped they felt. "You drew this," she whispered. He nodded, twisting his fingers nervously. "Yeah, it's from the day you told me I didn't have to be scared to come to school anymore." She blinked, eyes stinging. He looked up finally, meeting her gaze with a vulnerability so raw it nearly broke her again. "I didn't know grown-ups could help," he whispered. "Before you, nobody did." She pressed a hand against her heart, steadying herself. She knew she couldn't save him from everything. She knew she couldn't erase his past, or heal every wound, or guarantee a perfect future. But she had shown up, and sometimes, showing up changes everything. As the months continued, his parents entered a long-term treatment program. There were setbacks, relapses, days Toby asked questions he wasn't old enough to ask. Days he cried when he thought no one could hear him. Days he said nothing at all. But through it all, he returned to class each morning. He smiled sometimes. He laughed once unexpectedly during a science experiment when the baking soda volcano exploded too big and splattered foam across half the room. She remembered the sound of his laughter more vividly than the laughter of any other child. It was small, shy, new. She wondered how long it had been trapped inside him. Toward the end of the school year, his foster mother approached Miss Carter quietly before dismissal. "He talks about you a lot," she said, smiling gently. He said, "You were the first adult who ever listened to him without getting angry or tired." Miss Carter exhaled slowly, heart full and aching at once. "He saved himself," she said softly. "I just noticed. That's more than most people do." A few weeks later, during the last class party of the year, Toby approached her once more. His steps were steadier now, his eyes clearer. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Can we take a picture? I want to remember you. Even when I go to 5th grade." She smiled. Blinking back tears she refused to let fall in front of him. "Of course we can." He stood beside her, smiling a small, shy smile, as another teacher snapped the picture. Later, when she printed a copy for him, he held it with both hands, as if the photo were something precious. "It's the first picture I have with a grown-up," he whispered. The weight of that sentence hit her like a wave, not the kind that knocks you down. The kind that washes over you slowly, reshaping everything it touches. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm honored to be in it." As the school year drew to a close, their last day together arrived with a bittersweet stillness. Children hugged their friends, signed yearbooks, exchanged treats and stories. The room buzzed with excitement and nostalgia, but Toby sat quietly at his desk until the room emptied. Then he stood and walked to her slowly, the same way he had approached her on the day he gave her the bracelet. "Miss Carter?" he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." She knelt to his level, her eyes meeting his. "I will always see you, Toby. Always. Even when you're not in my class anymore." His eyes softened, glistening. "You helped me feel real," he said, "like I wasn't invisible." She reached forward and gently adjusted the bracelet still on her wrist, the beads worn slightly from months of wear. "You were never invisible," she said. "You just needed someone to look." He nodded once, a small, brave gesture, then hugged her tightly, not quickly, not nervously, but with the quiet confidence of a child who finally understood that not all adults would leave him behind. She held him close, allowing herself one moment to feel the full weight of what he'd become, and the full weight of what he had survived. When the bell rang and he pulled away, she watched him walk out the door, head a little higher, steps a little lighter. A boy who had carried far too much for far too long, now finally learning how to set some of it down. Summer passed with the quiet, steady rhythm of healing. The days grew longer, the air warmer, and the world seemed to expand around Toby in ways he had never known before. His foster family brought him to parks, to quiet libraries, to ice cream shops where he was allowed to pick any flavor without calculating which one would last the longest if he saved half for later. They introduced him to bedtime stories, to gently structured routines, to a home where doors didn't slam in fear or confusion, but closed softly with promises of safety. He learned that food didn't need to be hidden. He learned that mornings didn't have to start in silence, listening for the breathing patterns of adults who might not wake up. He learned that being 10 meant something entirely different than the life he had known, and slowly, something inside him began to unfurl. By the time autumn arrived and school resumed, he walked into the building with a posture that startled Miss Carter, not because it was bold or confident, but because it was no longer folded inward. His shoulders were straighter, his steps more certain. He even carried a new backpack, a simple one, but sturdy, with zippers that actually worked. She saw him before he saw her, and for one still moment, she allowed herself to absorb the change. The quiet boy who once trembled at every unexpected sound, who saved food in napkins, who washed clothes by hand in a sink to avoid the basement smell, who waited outside in the rain because home was unpredictable, was now taking up space in the hallway with gentle assurance. When he finally noticed her, his face warmed into a shy smile. "Hi, Miss Carter." Her heart softened instantly. "Hi, Toby. Welcome back." He hesitated, then walked closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a precious secret. "I'm in 5th grade now," he said, "but I asked if I could still come say hi to you in the mornings." She smiled. "You can come say hi to me anytime." He nodded, a blush creeping into his cheeks. "Okay, good." Over the next few weeks, he visited her classroom almost every morning before the bell. Sometimes he talked about a book he was reading. Sometimes he mentioned a funny moment at his foster home. Sometimes he said nothing at all, just sat quietly near her desk, the way a flower leans toward a familiar source of warmth. She never pushed, never probed, never asked for more than he offered. She simply listened, watched, witnessed. One crisp October afternoon, he stayed longer than usual. The other kids had filed out, backpacks bouncing, laughter echoing down the hall. But Toby lingered near the classroom window, tracing tiny circles on the glass with his finger. "My parents," he whispered. Miss Carter paused as she packed up papers. "What about them, sweetheart?" "They're trying," he said. "The social worker says they're doing better. But sometimes I'm scared. What if they get better and then not better again?" His voice tightened. "What if I go home and everything is the same as before? What if I have to be in charge again?" She walked to him slowly, kneeling so her eyes met his. "Toby," she said gently, "you don't have to be in charge anymore. Not of them, not of anything that takes away your childhood." He swallowed. "But what if they need me?" "They need help from grown-ups," she said softly. "Real help. Doctors, counselors, people who can carry the weight so you don't have to." He looked down. "I don't know how not to take care of them." "That's because you've never been allowed to be a kid," she replied. "But you're learning now. And you're not alone." He nodded slowly, though uncertainty still clouded his eyes. Healing is never a straight line. Some truths take time to settle. Some burdens take years to unlearn. As the weeks passed, Miss Carter watched him navigate the fragile balance between hope and fear. Some days he was bright, stepping into the classroom with stories and sketches he'd made at home. Other days he was quiet, retreating into himself with the same haunted stillness she had seen months before. But through it all, he kept returning. To school, to her classroom, to the small, tentative belief that the world no longer rested entirely on his shoulders. Winter approached slowly, brushing the edges of the days with early sunsets and cooler air. One morning, as snowflakes drifted past the classroom window, Toby hurried into her room, holding something carefully wrapped in tissue paper. "I made something," he said shyly. "For you. It's not very good, but I wanted you to have it." She smiled gently. "Can I open it now?" He nodded, shifting his weight anxiously. She peeled back the tissue paper, revealing a small drawing, a sketch done in soft pencil strokes. It was the two of them, her standing at the front of the classroom and him sitting at a desk, the light from the window touching them both. But what struck her most was the expression he had drawn on her face, gentle, patient, warm. The expression she hoped she wore, the expression she had tried so hard to give him. "Toby," she whispered, touched beyond words. "This is beautiful." His face pinkened. "I just wanted to draw. The first day I felt safe." Her breath caught. He looked at her quickly. "Is it okay? I can redo it." "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." She placed it delicately in her top drawer, the same drawer where she kept notes from former students, small gifts, and memories she treasured. But this drawing, this moment, felt different. It wasn't a keepsake. It was a chapter in his story, in their story, marking the moment a child learned what safety felt like. For the remainder of the winter, he visited almost every morning before the bell. Sometimes, even before she arrived, he would be waiting near her door, hands tucked into his sleeves but posture relaxed. The other teachers began to notice. "He really trusts you," one of them said quietly one afternoon as they ate lunch together. Miss Carter nodded, fingers brushing the bracelet still on her wrist. "He needed someone. I just happened to be the person who saw him first." "It takes more than seeing," the teacher replied. "It takes heart." She didn't answer. Not because she disagreed, but because her heart felt too full to speak. By spring, his parents had moved into a treatment program with ongoing supervision. They wrote him letters, gentle, apologetic letters that spoke of love they hadn't been able to express through the fog of their illness. The social worker read them first, ensuring they carried no hidden weight, then passed them along. Sometimes Toby shared the letters with Miss Carter. Sometimes he folded them away quietly. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he said nothing at all. But every time, she listened, patiently, without judgment, without pressure. Closer to the end of the school year, Miss Lane approached Miss Carter in the hallway with a folder tucked under her arm. "We're scheduling a supervised visit for Toby and his parents," she said gently. "He asked if he could talk to you about it before it happens." Miss Carter nodded softly. Of course. That afternoon, after dismissal, Toby waited by her desk again, fingers picking at the edge of his sleeve. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "What if they're mad? What if they're sad? What if they don't remember anything?" She sat beside him, letting the silence settle before she spoke. "You're allowed to feel scared," she said gently. "You're allowed to feel everything you feel. But sweetheart, healing takes time. For them, for you, and you don't have to do any of this alone." He nodded, though tears shimmered in his eyes. "Will you still be here?" he whispered. "Always," she answered. "I'm not going anywhere." He exhaled, shaky but relieved. And then, with the trust of a child who had learned finally that some adults stay, he leaned gently into her side. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, holding him quietly until the fear in him loosened, even if only for a moment. Spring warmed the edges of the school grounds, turning the last patches of snow into soft ribbons of water that wound through the playground. Children shed their winter coats, laughter growing lighter with each passing week. But for Toby, spring brought something else, something heavier, more complicated. The date for his supervised visit with his parents approached, hovering like a cloud that alternated between sunlight and shadow. Miss Carter noticed the change in him long before he said a word. He moved more slowly in the mornings. He chewed on his sleeve again, a habit that had faded months ago. His eyes drifted, unfocused, as though his thoughts had thickened into something too heavy to carry. One afternoon, after the class packed up and only the quiet hum of the overhead lights remained, Toby lingered at his desk. He held a small slip of paper in his hands, a note from the social worker, describing the time and place of the visit. He approached her with hesitant steps. "Miss Carter?" he murmured. She turned from her desk, sensing the fear beneath his voice. "Yes, sweetheart." He held the paper out, hesitant and trembling. They're better now," they said. "Not all the way better, but better enough to see me." She read the paper slowly, then looked up at him. "How do you feel about that?" His lips parted, but no words came. He opened and closed his hands, as though trying to hold on to something he didn't know how to describe. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know if I'm happy or scared or both. What if they're different? What if they're the same? What if they want me to come home and I'm not ready?" His voice cracked, and he pressed a hand to his stomach as if the ache had settled there. "Feeling unsure doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong," she said softly. "It means you're human. It means you've been through more than any child should ever have to face." He swallowed hard. "What do I say to them?" "Say whatever feels true," she replied. "You don't have to pretend to be okay. You don't have to protect them. This time, it's their turn to show up for you." He trembled slightly, and she gently guided him to sit beside her at the small round table in the corner of the room. The late afternoon light fell across his face, revealing a mixture of fear and hope woven so tightly it was impossible to separate. "Will you think about me on that day?" he asked quietly, eyes fixed on the table. Her breath softened. "I'll be thinking of you every minute." He nodded, a small but meaningful gesture, and something in his posture loosened just enough for him to take a deeper breath. The day of the visit arrived sooner than he expected. His foster mother brought him to the family center, a quiet building with soft chairs and murals painted on the walls, murals meant to comfort children who had seen too much. Toby clutched a small stuffed dog they'd given him during intake, its fur worn from months of anxious fingers. When his parents entered the room, they looked different. Not fully healed, but present, awake, their eyes clearer, their movements steadier. His mother's hair was brushed for the first time in months. His father's hands didn't shake as much. They approached slowly, as though afraid he might disappear if they stepped too quickly. "Toby," his mother whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, look how much you've grown." He stared at them, breathing shallowly. His father knelt. We're sorry. So sorry. For everything. We weren't ourselves." The room held its breath. Toby's voice was barely audible. I thought you forgot me." His mother shook her head, tears falling. "Never. We didn't forget. We were sick, and we didn't know how to ask for help." He trembled, hugging the stuffed dog tighter. His father reached out, but stopped halfway, lowering his hand respectfully. "You don't have to come home yet. Not until you're ready. We want what's best for you. We're trying to get better so we can be the parents you deserve." Toby's eyes filled slowly, painfully, with something that looked like relief and sorrow woven together. When he stepped forward and allowed his mother to hug him, the social worker looked away politely, giving them that sacred moment. After the visit, as he sat quietly in the car beside his foster mother, he stared out the window at the passing houses. "They didn't yell," he said softly. "They didn't fall asleep. They smiled." His foster mother reached over and squeezed his hand. "Because they're working to get well. For themselves. For you." He nodded, though confusion still shadowed his face. That night, he drew a picture of 3 people holding hands, one tall, one slightly shorter, and one small in the middle. He didn't show it to anyone. Not yet. He wasn't sure what it meant. The next morning, Miss Carter found him waiting outside her classroom door before the building had fully opened. His backpack hung neatly on his shoulder, and his hair was combed with careful, uneven strokes. He looked up at her with a mixture of fear and relief. "They're trying," he whispered. "My parents, they're really trying." She nodded gently. "How do you feel?" He took a long breath. Still scared, still sad, still hopeful. "That's okay," she said softly. "You're allowed to feel everything." He stepped forward, hugging her briefly, something he had done only once before. Then he pulled back quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "You never have to apologize for needing a hug," she replied. He smiled faintly, then moved toward his new classroom, but not before glancing back at her once more, like checking that she was still there, still real, still the anchor she had quietly become. As the year continued, the visits with his parents grew more frequent. Small steps, supervised conversations, gentle emotional work. Some visits were good, some were hard. Some left him silent for hours. Others made him talk more than she'd ever heard. But through every rise and fall of his heart, he returned to school each day stronger than the last. And then something happened that she didn't expect. Near the end of the school year, she received an email from the social worker. "Toby would like you to be present at his next meeting. He says he feels safe when you're nearby." She sat at her desk for a long moment after reading those words, letting their weight settle. Safe. A child who had lived in constant fear now associated her presence with safety. It humbled her. It broke her. It healed her in ways she hadn't known she needed. When she arrived at the meeting, Toby looked up from the table with relief easing across his features. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came," she replied. "I told you. I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, the corners of his lips lifting into a small, brave smile. The meeting went well. His parents, cleaner and clearer than she had ever seen them, spoke about the future not with demands or guilt, but with love and accountability. They acknowledged their mistakes. They acknowledged the harm, and they acknowledged his right to grow without carrying their burdens. Afterward, as they walked back to the car, Toby looked up at her with a softness he rarely showed. "Miss Carter, when I go home again someday, will I still be allowed to visit you?" Her eyes warmed. "You'll always be welcome in my classroom. Even when I'm older? Even when you're older." He thought for a moment. "Will you remember me?" She smiled, heart swelling. "Toby, I could never forget you." He nodded, satisfied in a quiet, profound way. That night, she cried softly at her kitchen table, not from sadness, but from the enormity of what it meant to be trusted by a child who had every reason not to trust anyone. Summer arrived again, warm and gentle, carrying with it a quiet sense of possibility. The school year ended with paper crowns, popsicle sticks glued into shapes, and laughter echoing down the hallways. Toby stood a little taller this year. His smile came easier. He raised his hand more often. He joined group work without shrinking into himself. And on the last day of school, he even signed a friend's yearbook, a small act to anyone else, but to him, a monumental step. As the classroom emptied and children spilled out into the sunlight, Toby lingered behind one more time. He approached Miss Carter's desk with hesitant steps, clutching something in his hands. "Miss Carter," he said, voice soft but steady. She looked up, smiling warmly. "Yes, Toby?" He lifted a small envelope. "It's for you. I wrote it last night. I wanted to give it before I forgot." She took it gently. "Thank you. May I open it now?" He nodded, twisting his fingers with nervous energy. Inside was a folded note, written in slightly uneven handwriting. She opened it slowly. "Dear Miss Carter, thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for helping me not be scared anymore. You made me feel like I mattered. You made me feel like a kid. I will never forget you. Your friend, Toby." Her throat tightened, but she kept her composure for him. "This is beautiful, Toby," she whispered. "I'll keep this forever." He smiled shyly. "I'm glad." As he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway. Looking back, with a question lingering in his eyes. "Miss Carter, do you think I'll be okay?" She stepped closer, kneeling so their eyes were level. "I do," she said softly. "Because you're strong and brave, and because you're learning that you don't have to carry everything alone." He nodded slowly, letting those words sink into him. "And if I get scared again, is it okay if I come talk to you?" She smiled, eyes warm. "Toby, you can always talk to me." This time, when he hugged her, it was different. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of gratitude. A quiet, steady gratitude that wrapped around her heart like the bracelet she still wore every day. She watched him walk down the hallway one last time before summer break, his steps lighter, his shoulders unburdened, his future stretching in front of him like an open field. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope, truly hope, that he believed he deserved something better. Weeks passed, then months. They kept in touch through school letters, drawings he mailed to her, and occasional updates from his foster family. His parents continued treatment, through relapses and recoveries, through hard days and hopeful ones. Healing was messy, unpredictable, but they tried, and so did Toby. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, nearly a year after the day she first noticed him wearing the same clothes, something unexpected happened. She was in her classroom, stacking books and prepping materials, when the door opened quietly. A boy stepped in, taller than she remembered, his hair neater, his clothes clean and comfortable, his eyes confident in a way that nearly shocked her. "Toby," she said softly. He grinned, shy but proud. "Hi, Miss Carter." She approached him quickly, taking in every change. "Look at you. You've grown so much." "I'm in 6th grade now," he said, puffing his chest playfully. "New school, new teacher, but I wanted to come see you." She placed a hand on her heart. "I'm so glad you did." He glanced around the room, nostalgia softening his features. "It looks the same," he murmured, "but I feel different now." She nodded. "How have you been?" He took a breath, considering. "I'm better," he said. "Really better. My foster family is great. I still see my parents, but only when it feels right. They're working hard. I'm proud of them. But I don't feel scared anymore." Those words, "I don't feel scared anymore," hit her like a blessing. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I drew something," he said. "Not like before. It's better now." He handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly. It was a drawing of 2 hands, one larger, one smaller, interlocked gently. Above them, written in his careful handwriting, were the words, "You didn't save me. You showed me how to save myself." Her eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall too quickly. "Toby, this is beautiful," she whispered. He smiled softly. "It's true. You didn't try to fix everything. You didn't try to take over. You just stayed. And I guess that was what I needed most." She reached out, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said, "more than you know." He looked up at her with a steady, confident expression, a look she had dreamed he would one day wear. "I wanted you to have this," he added, "because even if life gets hard again, I know how to ask for help now, and I know I'm not invisible." She closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of his words. "I will always be here for you," she whispered, "no matter how old you get." He nodded, smiling. "I know." He took a step toward the door, then hesitated one last time. "Miss Carter," he said gently. "Yes, thank you for seeing me before I knew how to be seen." And then he walked away. Not quickly, not nervously, but with the quiet steadiness of a boy who had finally learned what safety felt like, and what hope could grow into. She watched him go, the bracelet glimmering on her wrist, the drawing held close to her chest. And in that moment, she realized something beautiful. A child she once worried might never heal had become living proof that even the smallest acts of love, a gentle question, a quiet observation, a presence that doesn't leave, could change the entire trajectory of a life. In the weeks that followed his visit, Miss Carter found herself returning again and again to that final moment. The soft way Toby looked back over his shoulder, the confidence in his step, the quiet certainty that he was walking toward a future he no longer feared. She kept his drawing framed on her desk, not as a reminder of what she had done, but as a testament to what he had overcome. Because the truth, the quiet, complicated truth, was that Toby had always carried strength inside him. Strength to survive nights when the house was silent, except for the unsettling stillness of adults lost in addiction. Strength to walk to school in the same clothes for days, hoping no one would notice. Strength to take care of himself when childhood had been stripped away too soon. All he had needed was one adult, one moment, one question spoken with genuine care, to ignite the spark he had kept hidden beneath layers of fear. And she realized something else, something every teacher knows but rarely says out loud. Sometimes, the children who seem quietest, the ones who slip into the background, the ones who carry shadows in their eyes, are the ones holding entire worlds together all on their own. Toby had been one of those children, and witnessing his transformation had changed her as deeply as it had changed him. In the months that followed, she found herself noticing more, listening more, pausing when a child hesitated, watching for the small signs, the subtle shifts, the quiet warnings that often slipped through the cracks. Because she understood now, the difference between being seen and being overlooked can alter the entire course of a life. And Toby had taught her that. Years passed. Her classroom filled and emptied again and again with new faces, new stories, new challenges. But every so often, a small envelope would appear in her school mailbox, a drawing, a letter, sometimes even a photograph. A picture of Toby at a school science fair, smiling beside a poster he had made about the solar system. A picture of him on a soccer field, running faster than the camera could capture. A picture of him standing proudly beside his parents on a visiting day, their faces bright and sober and full of a love they had fought hard to reclaim. And then, one day, a photograph arrived that made her sit down as if her legs had suddenly forgotten their purpose. It was Toby, older now, taller, wearing a neat uniform, and holding a certificate with both hands. Award of Excellence Student Leadership. On the back, written in his still slightly uneven handwriting, were 5 simple words: "I'm doing okay now." She pressed the photo to her chest, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, not even tears of pride, but tears for the miracle of it all. That a life that once teetered on the edge of invisibility could bloom so fully, so beautifully, with just a little light. And she wondered how many other children walked through hallways each day, carrying stories no one had bothered to ask about. Children wearing the same clothes, children shrinking into themselves, children whispering, "I'm fine," because silence was safer than truth. Children waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. Toby had been one of them, but he wasn't invisible anymore. He never would be again, and neither would she. Because every time she looked at the bracelet he had given her, the cheap plastic beads that had dulled with time but somehow still glimmered in the light, she remembered the moment everything changed. 4 words, spoken quietly. Day 4, same clothes. Not an accusation, not a judgment, just awareness, just compassion, just a teacher paying attention. And sometimes that's all it takes for a child's entire world to shift. As she turned off the lights in her classroom one evening, years after their first meeting, years after the story had begun, she paused at the door, looking back at the empty desks bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. She whispered into the stillness, "For every child who still feels unseen, I'm watching, I promise." And with that, she stepped into the hallway, ready to meet the next quiet soul who might need her. Because Toby's story wasn't just his story, it was a reminder, a lesson, a call to kindness, one that she would carry for the rest of her life, and one she hoped the world would hear as well. Nobody is born invisible. The world just gets too loud sometimes, but one person, only one, can bring the light back. And Miss Carter had learned that sometimes the smallest noticing saves the biggest lives.